More hostages and Palestinian prisoners released as Israel's truce with Hamas is extended by a day, minutes before it was due to expire.
Controversial former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has died at the age of 100. The UN's nuclear watchdog warns that the dangers around Ukraine's nuclear power plants are multiplying.
More foreign ministers joined the boycott of North Macedonia's OSCE meeting over the presence of Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov.
More Palestinian prisoners have been welcomed back to the occupied West Bank. This latest exchange came before an extended truce deal with Gaza's Hamas militant group was continued for another day, minutes before it was set to expire. 30 individuals were released by the Israeli prison services, 16 minors and 14 women. Earlier, 16 Israeli hostages were handed over to the Red Cross. Palestinian Islamic Jihad claims to have been part of the handover, apparently confirming that not all the 240 hostages seized on the 7th of October are being held by Hamas. Israel has also been informed that 3 hostages, a mother and her 2 young children, including a 10-month-old baby, were killed in an Israeli bombing of Gaza. Israel says it's investigating the claim. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been meeting survivors of the Hamas attack. The group crossed the border on the 7th of October, killing 1,200 people in Israel and taking about 240 others hostage. Netanyahu has pledged to bring back all those abducted. Meanwhile, aid agencies fear that if further truce talks fail, the resumption of Israel's attack on Hamas will lead to an even deeper humanitarian crisis among Palestinians. Save the Children says it will try to continue providing what it described as basic relief aid, bottled water, food and essential medicines, but said it's not enough.
Emergency services arrive at the scene of an attack at a bus stop on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Police say at least 2 people have been killed and 7 others wounded in the morning rush hour assault. It's unclear if the attack was carried out by a Palestinian militant group or individuals acting on their own, or if it will have any impact on the current truce in Gaza. 2 Israelis were killed in a similar attack at the same bus stop last year. Former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has died at the age of 100. The German-born top diplomat, who became a US citizen in 1943, died at his home in Connecticut. Kissinger served during the Nixon and Ford administrations. A controversial figure, he was both vilified and won the Nobel Peace Prize. After he left office, he was dogged by critics who argued that he should be called to account for his policies on Southeast Asia and support of repressive regimes in Latin America.
Diplomacy as we know it today would not be the same without Henry Kissinger's influence. Born in Germany in 1923 to Jewish parents, his family fled Nazism and immigrated to the United States in the late 1930s. He became a naturalized citizen at the age of 20. The young Henry Kissinger was bilingual, knew his native country well and was known for his wit. He was spotted by the American Secret Service, which entrusted him with missions in Europe during the Second World War. Back in the United States, he studied at Harvard, where he became a professor. His expertise in international security opened the door to politics. Richard Nixon offered Kissinger his first key post, Assistant for National Security in 1969, then Secretary of State in 1973. At the time, relations between the United States and China had been at a standstill for over 20 years. Working behind the scenes, Henry Kissinger managed to renew the dialogue. In 1972, President Nixon met Mao Zedong, founder and leader of the People's Republic of China. The image of the United States was seriously tarnished by the war in Vietnam. Henry Kissinger proposed to the Nixon administration a 4-stage plan for disengagement for the conflict.
We believe that peace is at hand.
He took part in the negotiations that led to the signing of a ceasefire in Paris in 1973. His commitment earned him the Nobel Peace Prize that same year. An outstanding diplomat, Henry Kissinger became personally involved in negotiations. He was responsible for what came to be known as the shuttle policy, going back and forth between opposing parties. In the aftermath of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, he made 11 trips between Israel, Syria and Egypt until an agreement was reached. In the midst of the Cold War, his strategy led to a warming of relations between the United States and the Soviet Union. He had little sympathy for the diplomacy of the European Economic Community, forerunner of the European Union. He saw a lack of common international policy. In 1970, he said, "What is the phone number for Europe?" a phrase that would make him famous on our side of the Atlantic. Henry Kissinger left the US administration in 1977, though this did not prevent him from maintaining his influence in international diplomacy. In July 2023, he was received in China by President Xi Jinping at a time of tense relations with the United States. Henry Kissinger, a centenarian, worked until the end behind the scenes of diplomacy.
The dangers around Ukraine's nuclear power plants are increasing, according to the Atomic Energy Agency's Director General, Rafael Grossi. The proximity of fighting and power cuts to Ukraine's main plant at Zaporizhia is of particular concern. The nuclear boss made the comments during a visit to Bure in eastern France.
Il y a un tas de dangers qui se multiplient et qui sont là jusqu'à la fin du conflit, j'imagine. Donc on essaye par notre présence continue de mitiger un peu, d'avoir un effet dissuasif sur les uns et les autres pour éviter qu'à la misère de cette guerre, on ajoute un accident avec des conséquences radiologiques, n'est-ce pas?
Meanwhile, winter's ice grip is tightening on frontline soldiers near Bakhmut and Kupiansk. Kupiansk has been ravaged twice in the war, leaving a grim picture of total destruction. Moving to Bakhmut, Sergeant Roman and his unit have endured months in a bunker. The snow has given way to a biting cold on the outside, but inside, amidst the darkness, it's possible to feel relatively safe.
Мені отут взагалі комфортно, п'ятизіркові. Ті апартаменти п'ятизіркові.
But above ground, only tree stumps remain. Everything is broken and burnt. Elsewhere, the Russian Ministry of Defense has released footage of its troops firing at Ukrainian targets. Russian forces have ramped up attacks in eastern Ukraine, appearing to make territorial gains before the end of the year.
Top diplomats from more than 50 countries are in North Macedonia, which is chairing a meeting of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. But the foreign ministers of Ukraine, Baltic states and now Poland are boycotting the event due to the expected presence of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
Kaip galima diskutuoti Europos saugumą su valstybe, kuri yra ideologiškai nusiteikus tą saugumą sugriauti. Aš nematau galimybės rasti kompromiso, aš nematau galimybės ieškoti kažkokių bendrų sąlyčio taškų. Ir tokia pati pozicija ir kitų Baltijos šalių ministrų.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a brief stop in North Macedonia's capital, Skopje, for the meeting, but left for Israel before Lavrov arrived. Blinken has accused Russia of flagrant violations of every single core principle of Cold War efforts to ease East-West tensions that led to the creation of the OSCE, and accused Moscow of relentless efforts to obstruct the OSCE's work. Late Wednesday evening, Russia's foreign minister landed in North Macedonia, which is a NATO member. It briefly suspended its ban on flights from Russia for Lavrov to fly in. His presence is a rare visit for him to a NATO country since Russia started its invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Formal talks over the next 2 days will discuss the future of the organization and the challenges it faces.
Small backpacks, big purses. What's actually allowed on a plane? Airline rules change regularly, and the lack of common measures often leads to hidden extra costs. For many people, it's difficult to understand what size items are allowed on board for free, which has prompted the European Commission to ask airlines to come up with standard sizes.
Sometimes it's unclear. There is the uncertainty that somebody will stop you and go, you're not allowed that bag. But if every airline had the same rule, that would be easy. But then
the European Parliament asked some months ago for a standardisation of airlines' carry-on luggage rules. But instead of proposing measures by itself, the Commission says it will let the industry decide if they provide greater transparency or not.
This information should be provided to the traveller from the very beginning, to know exactly when you buy a ticket, what are you buying actually, what kind of luggage you can bring either on board or in the hold. This being said, we reserve our right that if nothing will happen in a reasonable amount of time, that we will step in.
On Wednesday, the European Commission proposed a series of measures to reinforce passengers' rights legislation, and is putting a special focus on the reimbursement of delayed or cancelled trips, as it's discovered gaps when it comes to intermodal journeys.
We've had delays, and sometimes it was very quick to settle it, and sometimes it took a very long time, and especially if you have like 2 flights on a row.
One way the Commission is trying to solve this is via a standard EU-wide reimbursement and compensation form. But it will also try to help passengers be more aware of their rights, especially if they're travelling by different means of transport or if they've booked the trip with an intermediary.